Could this lady, if she wanted to, answer this question? Is there, or was there, a secret link between the world's richest painter and the world's richest man?
Well, Picasso is the biggest phenomenon of our time. It never existed that a painter was able, with one movement of his hand, what necessarily didn't involve more than 10 seconds, that movement of the hand transformed in gold.
Picasso's estate has been valued at over $750 million. And the world's richest man? Who is he?
Howard Hughes.
You, on the march!
This week, as it must to all aviation's pioneers, the great heart of a welcoming nation went out to handsome, well-heeled hero Howard Hughes.
Joseph Cotten. He first came to Hollywood to play Howard Hughes in a movie.
I put the sweat of my life into this thing. I have my reputation rolled up in it.
Then the director changed his mind and changed Tycoons.
And I have stated several times that if it's a failure, I'll probably leave this country and never come back, and I mean it.
And that's what he did.
This lady, does she know more than she's telling?
Ladies and gentlemen.
Or is she telling more than she knows?
Ladies and gentlemen, I've been asked to provide a few words of explanation. Now, how shall I begin?
You're talking about movies. Begin with the director.
You ought to do that.
Modesty forbids.
Oh? Oh. Well, we all know what the critics have said about the movie.
Our movie coming soon to this theater?
Delicious, delirious, delightful.
Go on.
I'm quoting the critics. They've acclaimed it as a cinematic... More than one movie director was involved in these proceedings. One of them was Mr. Howard Hughes. He really was a movie director, once. And he really did play an important part in this movie. I'm sorry, before he died, that is. If he did die. And if, in fact, that he was really Howard Hughes in the first place. Or any place.
Was Mr. Hughes a vegetable? A spook? A gibbering lunatic? Was his hair down to his knees? Were his fingernails 9 inches long?
I photographed his ham sandwich. That's no lie. I really did.
Why should anyone doubt you?
Well, after we finished shooting this film, several of our leading characters have been doing time in Spanish, American, and Swiss jails. Why should anyone believe any one of us?
Exposed, a man who holds the art world to ransom.
Mrs. Irving, before she turned up at the Swiss bank disguised in a black wig.
So why do you want people to do fakes?
Because the fakes are as good as the real ones, and there's a market and there's a demand.
If you didn't have an art market, then fakers could not exist.
I know one thing. I never offered a painting or a drawing to a museum who didn't buy it. That never refused one. Never.
Oh, yeah. They never caught her.
She may never be charged formally with any of these crimes, but the media keeps on calling her the Hungarian Connection.
Her real name is Oya Kodar. Or so she says. I made these photographs.
And the movie.
Yes, and I photographed the movie. My real name is...
Mention the title.
My real name is Gary Graver.
The title.
F for fake.
Good. Go on.
Well, who, for instance, gave her that tiger to begin with? Why is she mentioned in Howard Hughes' will? And how? And which will?
There have been a lot of those wills, of course, but she has one of the best.
She also had a grandfather who was the best forger in history.
Yes, but she's a legitimate painter herself, though she never breathed a word of that to Picasso. He painted her 22 times, 22 fabulous nudes. And she got away with them all.
She got away with murder. And then there's the autobiography.
Whose autobiography?
Whose? Hughes. Why, before Michel Legrand started writing our music, Clifford Irving had finished forging that manuscript.
And in handwriting, the experts swore was genuine Hughes.
All the world loves to see the experts and the establishment made a fool of.
Irving was our expert on forgery. An expert critic and observer. We never dreamed that while he was acting in our picture, he was secretly committing forgery himself. The author of the fake autobiography was also the author of a real biography about a faker, the great art faker, Elmire.
Great faker of the 20th century becomes a modern folk hero for the rest of us who have a bit of larceny in ourselves, but simply don't have the courage or the opportunity to express it.
The following commercial message, which is fairly brief and completely dishonest, concerns the advent soon on this same screen of the motion picture entitled F for Fake, which rips the veil of secrecy from a whole series of scandalous items.
For instance, the 22 Picassos, worth who knows how many millions. How did this young woman get her hands on them?
Why did her grandfather soak them all in gasoline and burn them to ashes? People wonder why it was so difficult to get permission to show this film in America.
They should remember that when F for Fake was playing to packed houses in the rest of the world, Howard Hughes was still alive.
Supposedly.
And if Coda was carrying on with Picasso in the south of France, how did Hughes, who was busy at the time growing his toenails in Vancouver, make it to those secret meetings on the Mexican pyramid?
And what about the tiger? Who is under that sheet? By what strange chain of circumstances did this savage beast move from Managua to a penthouse swimming pool in Beloit, Wisconsin? And who is this man? See F for Fake, the movie that dares to ask that question.
The UFOs, Gary, we were going to mention, remember that the unidentified flying objects only appeared after my radio broadcast?
And what about that flying object?
Ah, what indeed? What am I doing with Oya Koda's grandfather?
Her grandfather died before Howard Hughes, practically in Picasso's arms, unrepentant and unpunished after a long lifetime of crime.
Many of the more distinguished victims of this levitated old crook maintain that, practically speaking, he was so anonymous, he may never even have existed.
And here,
ladies and gentlemen, suppose I come right out with it and admit to you now that my old Martian hoax on the radio was, well, not exactly a hoax. That there were secret sponsors of that broadcast who were, in fact, some rather influential beings from outer space. You smile.
10 seconds more, Orson.
I think they're smiling, Gary, and I'd just like to remind them that it is since that broadcast that there have been in this country alone more than 100,000 authenticated sightings. You still think it's a joke? Good. That's the way we want you to feel about it. For now.
We'd like to make this little commercial message as modest as possible. So we'll just say that critics all over the world have called it a masterpiece.